Hello my friends, 1 year ago I have made a video about switching to Micro Four Thirds, and my conclusion from that video was that it is an interesting option, but it is not necessarily for everyone. A lot has changed since then. Two very interesting Micro Four Thirds cameras were introduced. Those are the Panasonic G9 and GH5S. I had an opportunity to test both and also some great lenses. So today I would like to revisit that video and talk about whether you should start using Micro Four Thirds system or even switch to Micro Four Thirds, why I now use Micro Four Thirds cameras much more than I did a year ago, and also what I expect from Panasonic full frame cameras that will be introduced next year. What has to be said right at the beginning is that every camera is a compromise and every sensor size is a compromise as well. As I've said in my comparison video between full frame and Micro Four Thirds cameras, I don't think that purpose of Micro Four Thirds is to do what full frame does. What you basically need to do when deciding whether Micro Four Thirds is the right system for you is to find out what it can do and even more importantly how it can do it, because that is in my opinion the main strength of Micro Four Thirds. There are also some advantages of specific Micro Four Thirds cameras. In my case, the G9 and GH5S that are not related to the sensor size, like the user interface, handling, and controls. The first reason why I use Micro Four Thirds cameras more are the new sensors. I have previously used 16 megapixel sensor in Panasonic G85, and it was actually a really good sensor with very decent dynamic range and good ISO performance up to ISO 3200. New 20 megapixel sensor used in GH5, G9 or OMD EM1 Mark II is better in every way despite having smaller individual pixels. It for example beats Canon's newest APS-C sensor in terms of dynamic range. Stills are usually usable up to ISO 6400 depending on the scene, and overall it is not a low light beast like some full frame sensors, but it is more than good enough for me in the real life use, especially when paired with other features like the in-body image stabilization that I will talk about later. 10.2 megapixel sensor used in GH5S is another great sensor, but I will talk about that later on. Autofocus, or the improvement of autofocus, is the second reason why I use the G9 in situations where I would hesitate a bit to use the G85. When I unboxed the G9 and went out to shoot autofocus samples for my initial review, I was quite shocked because back then Panasonic had pretty bad reputation for the autofocus on GH4, G85 and the GH5 with firmware 1.0, which wasn't that great either. The G9 on the other hand just works fine for my hands-on shots and focusing from close distance to far distance. It still could be tricked, but with a little cooperation I had no problems. With firmware 1.1 came improved tracking, which was simply impressive. I mean, even if this was shot on Sony with hybrid autofocus or Canon with dual pixel autofocus, I would still say that it is good. The autofocus on GH5S is similar, and Panasonic full frame cameras will also use contrast-based DFD system. I have talked about that in my video from Photokina, so I expect the DFD algorithm to further improve, and new firmware for G9, GH5 and GH5S will also be released soon. Next thing that I would like to talk about in this video is the image processing. This has a lot to do specifically with video, because today users want things like 10-bit 422 video, 4K 60p, good processing of footage shot with log profiles, and so on. These are all very difficult tasks for the internal components of the camera besides the sensor, because the camera has to take that information from the sensor and transform that to footage that the camera is outputting. With some high-resolution full-frame sensors, like the one in Sony a7R Mark III, that is actually the reason why the video quality is better if you just crop the center of the frame, because at current stage of technology, the internals of camera are just not able to process that footage well enough. This also causes problems like rolling shutter effect, which is a real pain to deal with, or overheating. Of course, Micro Four Thirds sensors won't capture as much data as full frame sensors, but by using the Micro Four Thirds sensor, it was possible for Panasonic to release cameras such as GH5 in January 2017 with features like downsampled full sensor 4K 60p video, 10-bit video, and later even 422 all-intra codec with internal recording, and it is only now that cameras with larger sensors are slowly starting to catch up. GH5S took that even further by using 10.2 megapixel sensor, which provides just as much resolution as necessary, so the individual pixels are larger and those can capture more information. GH5S is a more specialized camera than the regular GH5. It is intended specifically for shooting video, and I have to say that specifically for video, it is the best camera that I have tested so far. My most favorite feature of the GH5 is the combination of 10-bit 422 codec and V-Log picture style. It uses excellent multi-aspect ratio sensor, which gives you same diagonal field of view regardless of whether you shoot 4:3 anamorphic video or 17:9 4K DCI. When combined with great processing, it provides great footage for color grading. Even though it is a niche camera, it still uses same rugged camera body as the GH5 with great controls, great user interface, fully rotatable touchscreen that almost everybody likes, comprehensive weather sealing, and so on. There is no in-body image stabilization in the GH5S. I don't know whether that was done on purpose or to prevent the interference with the gimbal, or it just wasn't possible to do that with multi-aspect ratio sensor. GH5S uses dual native base ISO, so it has two analog circuits for amplifying the signal. In the real world, that means that the footage is great anywhere between the lowest ISO and ISO 6400 or even 12800, with the best dynamic range being at native ISO values, so 400 and 2500 or 800 and 5000 in V-Log. As I have said, it is a niche camera, but not as niche as I thought. It may not be as versatile as the GH5, but if you shoot primarily video and you use tripod or gimbal most of the time, it may be the one for you, and honestly, the output is very hard to beat. At the moment, my two main cameras are Panasonic G9 and Sony a7 Mark III, although I will be adding new cameras soon. Both have their place in my production. I use the G9 more for outdoor shooting because, as I have said, the performance is more than sufficient, it is more fun to use, it has great in-body image stabilization, it is easier to handle and controls are better, so I just grab that one more often. At the moment, I mostly use a7 Mark III for production on this channel, and it does a great job of that by providing solid output in almost any conditions, so if I don't want to bother with light, it is convenient to just use a7 Mark III. The autofocus is also great on a7 III, the handling is good enough, although it is more of a pragmatic choice rather than something that I would particularly enjoy using, especially with that outdated user interface. I admit that since I've bought my first Micro Four Thirds camera in January 2017, whole Micro Four Thirds system has grown on me a lot. So why am I so happy that Panasonic will be introducing full-frame cameras with L-mount? As I have said, great advantage of Micro Four Thirds was, and still is, that it allows manufacturers to build fully featured cameras around that sensor, thanks to lower requirements for processing power, power consumption, more room left for in-body image stabilization, and so on. The technology has advanced since. Some great and some not so great full-frame mirrorless cameras were introduced in 2018, and now I feel like the state of technology is good enough for building fully featured full-frame cameras. So what I hope that the S1 full-frame camera will be is a larger version of Panasonic G9 with output of Sony a7 Mark III. That would be enthusiastic choice and pragmatic choice at the same time. A lot remains to be answered, like whether it will shoot 10-bit video, but I expect both S1 and S1R to be good cameras. Panasonic has decided to stick with contrast-based DFD-AF system. I approve of that choice because of the reasons that I have explained in the video from Photokina, which is linked in the description. That doesn't mean that Micro Four Thirds will be a less attractive option. Panasonic will continue developing Micro Four Thirds. It will still benefit from smaller size, And there is still room for development of things like 14-bit RAW stills and RAW video capture, maybe higher frame rates, maybe 5.2K RAW video, and so on. It will still be a very interesting option for wildlife, especially with lenses like Leica 50-200mm f2.8-4, which is remarkably small, and even if you consider the crop factor, you are not losing that much light in comparison to similar full-frame lenses. Overall, the main reason why I now use Micro Four Thirds and Panasonic G9 in particular more is that it is easy and fun to use and it still provides great image quality. It is not perfect, but in the daily use, I found that to be more important than having excess image quality that I won't take advantage of. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.